Hey everybody, welcome back to Electric Cafe. Today's album review is on Missing Persons' debut album, Spring Session M. Um, so they, so Missing Persons was a California band from Los Angeles, and they had quite a bit, quite a but, can't talk this morning, quite a bit of buzz back in like 1980, 1982, 1983. They had four really strong singles from this. Excuse me. They all charted on the top 100 chart, but that didn't show the really success that they really or the buzz they really created with those tracks. Like they were, like Words and Destination Unknown and stuff like that. They were played on MTV a lot during those days, but also just in the local scene growing up in Los Angeles, Missing Persons were kind of the one of the examples of kind of the edgier, female-led new wave bands. Blending kind of a rock and a new wave. It was kind of like if you took Pat Benatar or something like that, and or even Heart or something like that, and sort of put a new wave edge to them and sort of brought them into the future. Dale Bosio, great style, great look, futuristic, dressed, like she was from outer space. Wild hair, a lot of stage presence, really nice legs. She was just a fireball up there. And the band was really strong behind them. Terry Bozzio played in UK, the prog rock band in the late '70s. So he was quite quite a, I wouldn't say revered or anything like that, but he was quite experienced to be in a young band. And then also Wayne, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Couture or something like that. I think he was later in. Was he in Duran Duran for a little bit? I always think that guy looks the same as the guy who used to be in Duran Duran in the mid '90s. Um, Maybe not though, but I always forget if that's the same guy. Um, but he really strong guitar, good guitar riff. Player as well. Has some really nice moments on a lot of these. Kind of does like this cascading kind of tone guitar, kind of sort of air guitar with some effects on it. And then you had possibly the most talented person on keyboard, in my opinion, was Patrick O'Henry. And he was really known, or Patrick O'Hearn, excuse me, O'Henry. Um, Patrick O'Hearn, who, after he left, and it was shortly after. I mean, he was already into doing new age albums in the early '80s or middle '80s. I do have a couple of his albums. I think one of them was like either 80, 85 or 89. I don't know why those years stick out to me. But yeah, so he had and I think he did some soundtracks and stuff like that as well. So he's pretty talented over the last 30, 40 years, and with his producing and keyboard playing. So just a very talented group overall. I don't know too much about the bass player. There was sort of a fifth member, the bass player, obviously. I don't really recall him that much, but really strong band. And I really liked the first three albums of. They had three albums. This album, then there was, I think it was Rhyme and Reason, I think was the 1984 album. This one came out in '82, and then '86 was Color of Life, I believe, or and then they broke up. It's like a lot of bands did in the '80s. Trying to get through that period of the late '80s was tough for a new wave band. And I think they came back in the early 2000s, but they've been and they have some new albums out the last few years, and been releasing a lot of their unreleased stuff as well. So if you don't know them and you check them out and you like some of their music, they're doing a lot of music now too, and also releasing a lot of unreleased works on is it Caroline Records, which totally makes sense unless it's Cleopatra. But I think it's Caroline Records, which is, um, if I'm not mistaken, I think they have a sister label in Canada, but can't remember the other one that's associated with Caroline. But Caroline was been around since the late beginning of the '80s. So their new stuff is on the right label for their sound. I feel like too. So I'm interested to check out those albums, the newer ones. I haven't heard their albums, and it's kind of a band that I wouldn't mind seeing live 40 years later. Um, I really like their sound, and I think I think the years have gone on, they've gotten a lot of respect for their blending of rock music and new wave music, in especially in a kind of a LA way, because they have a Sunset Strip kind of sound that that makes complete sense for what they sounded like, and they're still touring now, and or not touring, but they're still always playing in the Southern California area. Seems like all the time. So yeah, so there's 12 songs on the album. Um, the first song, Noticeable One, is not bad. It's a star and three-quarter stars. Um, Not bad. I don't think it's a great opener for the album compared to what's coming up, but it's okay. Windows I really do like. It's got a cool keyboard sounds and nice guitars, and a really good groove. And that's one thing that I really like about them. Also, is they have there's some moments where they have a good electronic and rock groove. I have Windows 3 stars. It Ain't None of Your Business, track number 3. Also a nice groove. More keyboard sounds. Definitely a solid LA rock sound. 2.25 stars. And then one of their singles, Destination Unknown, I have it 3 stars. It's kind of a new wave staple. It sounds a little bit like Gary Newman. The way she sings it. If you don't know Destination Unknown and you like Gary Newman, definitely check out that song. I'm sure you've heard it if you know early new wave stuff. But the way he sings it is just like the way she sings it is just like Gary Newman. Walking LA is I think it's a underrated classic. I think it's an anthem. I know it's an anthem of LA because it's you hear it all the time back in the day, and I can't think of any more popular song that has LA in the title. Um, so it's like a fixture of new wave, and I remember it so well, and I think it still holds up really well right now. There's a rawness especially after the first chorus, or maybe it's this. I think it's the first chorus, around like a minute 10, and it gets into this groove where it kind of builds up, and then starts the next verses, and the way she sings it and stuff. I just love that second minute there is really cool. Um, but I think it's growing as vaporwave gets bigger. More people look towards the '80s. It's synth pop, synth wave. Like Walking LA is just. I think the legend of it's grown over the years, and it keeps growing, and I hope someday it'll be considered a classic, because it really is. 4 stars. My favorite song on the album. Tied with Words. I do really like Words as well. U.S. Drag, track number 6, got 2 stars. It's kind of a little bit more funky, nice guitar riffs. Kind of has like a broken beat kind of funk to it. 2 stars. Tears, I like a little better, 2.5 stars. It's a little poppy, but it's still good. Here and Now is kind of their sound for sure. Doesn't quite get to the levels of some of the singles do, though. 2 stars. Words, it's kind of a classic of MTV Generation. It's amazing that it only hit number 72 on Billboard. Like, you hear it and you're like, you would think that it was top 10 or top 20, but they were a little too. I don't know if they were a little too edgy for pop radio, but maybe they were just you know, well, they were on EMI and I mean Capitol Records, so you would think they'd have like the push, to get on like major radio across the world, but I mean across the nation at least. But I would think they probably just got to number 72 based on the excitement on in the local area of Los Angeles with the song, and then possibly with the MTV generation, because this was like a staple on MTV generation and in MTV in those days. And you hear the track and you're like, this must be a top 10 track back then. And you're like, I mean, it's probably as big as like like a flock of seagulls, like Iran or Duran Duran or something like that. It's just like, I'm just kind of surprised that it only reached 72. But it's definitely a cool song, and it's one of their um, top songs that they're kind of recognized with. 4 stars. Bad Streets. I really like the groove in this one too. It's nice keyboards. 2 and 3/4 stars. Track number 11, Rock and Roll Suspension. Kind of the weakest song on the album, I feel like. I gave it a half star. And No Way Out, not necessarily a great track either. I got it 3/4 of a star, so not necessarily ending on the best. Are they running out of ideas or something? I don't know, but I don't think so, because there's a good strong 8, 7, 8, 9 songs on here. It's just there's 2 or 3 that are kind of under 2 stars for me, that are just either not very good or okay. When I look at the overall of this, it's just a really good combination of new wave, punk or rock. New wave and punk, but sort of has like a. I mean, it has a. I wouldn't say a tinge of punk, but it has kind of like. I think sometimes when maybe to punk people that really like punk music, when you say something has like a punk attitude in it, or a punk uh, essence of punk in there, like they're like, no, that's not punk. And I get it, it's not traditional punk, but it's not rock. So if it's more edgy and more shorter tracks, and it's faster, and it's got more edge, and got kind of a fu attitude, and probably got more balls in it. Like it's not rock, right? It's more towards punk. So sometimes when I say it has the essence of punk, or it's new wave mixed with punk, it's new wave mixed with rock, but it has a little bit of a punk edge to it, in my opinion. Kind of an urban, raw sound. It's not a polished rock sound, you know. But just some really strong singles with words: Destination Unknown, Walking LA. I'm missing one other one. Yeah, I thought there was 4 singles on here. I think one of the other tracks made either Windows or It's None of Your Business, I think, made the top 100 as well as a single. So it's sort of 4 singles on here, but some really strong singles, and a couple of good kind of secondary songs like Windows, if that wasn't one of the singles, or Tears, or Bad Streets. I like some of the sounds on those tracks as well. As far as the opportunities, maybe a little bit too many songs. 12 songs. I think if everybody had a chance to take off 2 songs on here of whatever choice it was, it would be a little bit more compact, and I think it would rank a little bit closer. But that kind of happens to a lot of songs that kind of go over 10 songs. There's a couple you probably want to take off, and it would kind of tighten up the album, make it a little bit better, make it play a little bit better, and be a little bit more consistent. But it's one of those things where you don't mind that there's more songs on there. Nobody's gonna complain that there's. I don't know. Some people complain there's too many songs, but I mention it a lot, actually. But it's not necessarily a complaint, but it's like, could have been a little bit more. Could have been a little bit more concise, so it plays better. Sometimes it's hard to hear 12, 13, 14, 15 songs of any artist. I don't care how good the album is, these days. It might have been different 30, 40 years ago. You play an album, and that was pretty normal. And it is kind of like that in the last 20 years, where bands are sort of known for singles and not really known for albums, and the albums don't really sell well because the singles do well. And people only buy the singles, and they're like, oh, this band's not that good, but I like the song, but I don't really want to buy the album. It's a lot different in the 70s and 80s. You would just buy the album. The 12-inch kind of changed that in the 80s, but still, 60s and 70s, you well, at least the 70s, you would buy the album. I mean, the 60s, you had the 45s, right? So that was kind of the same thing. So, but even more so maybe the last 10, 20 years. Maybe it's changed with vinyl coming back the last 10 years, 15 years or so. But um, then more people are up to buy an album more so than they were in the 2000s at least, in my opinion. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's just kind of one of those things where it's hard to listen to any band for 50, 60 minutes, especially when you're a collector like me and you have 20,000 records and CDs. You know what I mean? It's just like, like, I'm one that has pretty good attention span and one that has pretty good patience, and I enjoy listening to the lesser known songs and the entire albums and stuff like that. And I still get a little bit like, okay, I don't know if I can meet this whole album and play the whole album, so I won't play it today. I do get that sometimes. I'll walk around my CDs and I'll be like, oh, let me play this, and I'm like, that's pretty long. I don't think I have time or the patience for an hour album. Let me put on something a little shorter. So I'll put on an EP or a 12-inch or something like that. But yeah, just nobody's gonna play about more songs. But sometimes you're wondering if you know if and then not all those 12 songs are good. You know what I mean? And that's gonna be opinion to opinion between people. But I'm sure everybody would probably think that there's a couple tracks on here that could be taken off, and it would be a lot better. But again, that doesn't ruin the scores. That just kind of throws off my scoring system on the stars per song, but it doesn't fully make my decision on where the album is. And I think this one's a sort of an example of that. So it averages out to 28.5 stars divided by 12, which is a 2.37, which would normally put it around 58. And I bumped it up a couple points because I think it's a good album. I don't think it's an okay album or a pretty good album in the high 50s. I think it's a good album, so I put it at 61 out of 100. So that's my score. So I appreciate you watching. Sorry, I'm a little tired. It's my first cup of coffee today, so my first review of the day. So coming up, I have Swing Out Sister, Soft Cell, and Book of Love. So some other rare kind of 80s new wave and dance music. All right. Well, thanks for watching this review on Missing Persons Spring Session M. Curious if you have a favorite album of theirs, and I'd be curious more if you know any of their early music. If you could recommend a song. I've definitely, since I was starting these album reviews, I went through their discography and I was like, I knew they'd been playing around like Cactus Club and the Canyon in Southern California. Like I would always kind of see that they were playing locally. I think it was the Canyon, not the Cactus, the Canyon Club, and I think it was Aurora Hills in California. They play there a lot at that venue and other places in Southern California. And but then I went and noticed, and I saw that they're doing new albums again. So curious if anybody could recommend just like one song or one album, and I'll check it out. And that'll be the first one I look to not necessarily to review, but to check out and see what they're up to now. I'll be curious. Hopefully they have some vintage sound on there, and it's not just like sort of rock sounds with a little bit of electronic music. Hopefully it has some like vintage sounds with that. I don't know if Patrick O'Hearn is doing their keyboards anymore, but I'm pretty sure Wayne is still with the guitar, and of course her husband Terry's still playing drums, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I'd be curious if you could recommend something. All right, take care.